essentially of what we've learned from several reports, including Venezuela, other countries, to make it this far. I was reading this morning, NBC News had a report out that once Title 42 expired at 11:59, it was quiet. A lot of folks were waiting until daylight to make any types of moves, but people were being processed. But there were cheers at that moment, at least according to the NBC News reports, once Title 42 was lifted. You remember, it's a public health policy that was implemented during the Trump administration. It had to do with COVID, but essentially it was a tool that was used to push back those that were coming across. You know that from Secretary Mayorkas, the soundbite that we played, where he said we've expelled more than 1.4 million, I believe it was, and he was able to do that utilizing Title 42. So what happens now? What are the restrictions in place? So they have Title 8, and that's been around for a while. It's essentially what that's going to do, if migrants want to come across, and they want to do it in a legal fashion, they're going to go through Title 8. Title 8 essentially will ask migrants to declare credible fear from the country that they're coming from. So if they explain to the CBP agent that's working the processing unit that they are declaring a credible fear, then they can come through. The issue with that, Title 8 versus Title 42, is the response time, or the processing time, is double. On top of who's allowed to come in the country, which seems to be higher numbers, but now you've got the processing time at an hour per individual that's coming across, and then you have trial dates set, some not set. This, again, how is this manageable for the government, for the federal government, for the courts as well? As we pointed out, some of these court cases, remember, they have to go through the courts. They're going to be processed in 10 years from now.
Sure. And here's what's happening now, right? They're coming through, they're being processed as quickly as they can be. They're given that court date and then sent on a bus. And that's what we've seen. We've seen sanctuary cities accept migrants, and that's only going to increase. But to your point, Sean, this is an honor system. That's essentially what it is. That was the takeaway from the briefing room I had yesterday from Secretary Mayorkas. You know, you might get that assignment to come in for court date several years from now, but who's going to enforce it? Who's going to make sure that these folks actually show up?
They're tracked.
Right. Well, you know, you're not going to send ICE after them. It's just not realistic. The sheer numbers alone would likely prevent.
They're not just in the border towns. We're seeing we'll wrap it up here, but we're seeing the busing, right? And they're sent to D.C., to other cities here. So they are scattered across the country. You want to look at it from a humanitarian perspective.
Well, who's checking up on them to make sure they're doing okay?
But you also have to look at it from an infrastructure of, can this country handle what you are allowing in at this time? Record numbers will continue to follow.
We are sacrificing our sovereignty as a nation at the altar of open borders, just for the sake of political ideologues who are in the White House, who are in the Department of Homeland Security, who don't care.
They don't care. And everybody's lying and saying that they believe.
The shift changed from Title 42 to other provisions put in place, but also Title 8, and we'll explain that and more. Now, could take years. Some court dates reportedly set for 2033 due to the amount of those trying to cross over. The White House saying migrants crossing illegally who don't seek protection in another country first and fail to apply online will be shut out of the U.S. for 5 years. They could possibly face criminal charges as well.
Again, the State Department working to make an online platform, too, where migrants can apply for those asylum appointments. But it's not just border towns which are facing a surge. This is footage here of a migrant bus arriving in Washington, D.C., home of Vice President Kamala Harris, just outside the so-called border czar. They were reportedly dropped off, again, outside the U.S. Naval Observatory. Harris, you might recall, was tapped as the border czar, though she's not visited the hotspots of the border. Here's how the current administration is describing the situation.
What is next for those that are waiting to cross? You see many children in this area. Title 42, that public health emergency that was put in place during the Trump administration, which held back a lot of people trying to cross illegally, is no longer in place at 11:59 p.m. That expires, rather, at 11:59 tonight. Left side of your screen, it appears to be you're not going to be able to get through that barbed wire. You're going to communicate to move them to a different location. Again, to the port of entry, where legal entry would be conducted to seek asylum. Again, remember, this is not the way to do it. This is the way they're telling you, don't cross this way. One, it's dangerous. Two, it's illegal. But again, what Secretary Mayorkas said, Emma, is that these smugglers have been sending false information to those trying to cross.